Hey guys, I think it's finally time for me to talk about Graham Platner and this whole situation going on. So, Graham Platner was very credibly accused of rape recently. I'm sure you guys have seen it if you check the news. It is a very credible accusation. There's not really any denying it. He did it. Like, let's be real. The accusation has documentation dating back before he was ever involved in politics. There's like emails with her therapist, text messages between her and friends. It it lines up. Now, obviously, I am removing all support from Graham Platner. As many of you may know, I was a pretty big supporter of him until now. And I think rape is a pretty reasonable area to draw the line at. Like, his campaign's over. He needs to drop out of the race. And ideally, we can replace him with a different candidate like Troy Jackson. He has, I think, now 5 days. No, it was 4 or 5 days to drop out if we want to replace him with another candidate. So he's losing all major endorsements. He's having his staff obviously turn against him because what he's been credibly accused of is horrific. So, where do we go from here? Well, of course, we keep pressuring him to drop out of the race. And ideally, we can replace him with Troy Jackson. Now, Troy Jackson is another progressive candidate who I believe placed third in the gubernatorial race in Maine. Very similar politics, although he is endorsed by the DSA, whereas Platner was not. Troy Jackson was also endorsed by Bernie Sanders in the gubernatorial race, whereas Platner has now lost that Bernie Sanders endorsement for obvious reasons. I don't think there's really any major candidate who has kept their endorsement of Graham. I personally still stand by my initial support of him until now. Given the limited knowledge I had available to myself, I think that supporting him was the right choice given that information. But now, knowing what I know in hindsight, it is clear that he is not a good candidate or a good person. With the other controversies, like the tattoo, that was the first one. The tattoo, that at least had like a logical explanation and out, which is he was drunk in Split, Croatia, and got what he thought was a skull and bones tattoo. That is plausible enough. And then moving on, the Reddit history. Pretty bad comments, but people say some dumb stuff on the internet that they then regret later. I get that. And then moving on to the article of his past partners, the only credible accusation was from a literal Republican operative who had motivation. So, that one didn't feel too solid either. But this one is different. Now, I think consent is important. I think rape is a horrific crime, and he should probably be in jail. No, not probably. He should. Like, this one, there's no logical excuse. There's no way around it. Basically, it's about as concrete as you can get. So I don't support him. I want him to be tried, and I want him to drop out. Which, sucks, because I do think he ran a really good campaign. But it's also important to understand why he got this far. Now, a lot of people are using Graham Platner to discourage the entire movement, rather than focus on the individual morality of Graham Platner. Graham Platner did have a lot of red flags, I can admit that, but I think the fact that he got this far shows people's hunger for change. Now, obviously, Graham Platner cannot continue to represent this movement. Rape is just that's unacceptable. Like, come on. We're not going to vote for that. But Graham Platner made it this far despite his red flags, not because of them. His message resonates with people, and his replacement candidate needs to continue that message. People are frustrated, and people are upset. Rightfully so. The cost of living is insane. Grocery prices, healthcare, rent. It's absurd. It's difficult to survive. And people are frustrated. They want a politics that represents the working class. And that is why Graham Platner made it this far. Because he addressed that hunger that people had. And that's something we need to continue. Just because Graham Platner is a horrific person does not mean that we should replace him with some cookie-cutter DC candidate. There's a reason that Janet Mills lost the primary. She represented a politics that doesn't represent people, that no one cares for anymore. And we do need to address that. Because if we replace Graham Platner with a candidate like Janet Mills, the race is as good as lost. And so is our chances of winning the Senate majority. We need a progressive candidate who will center the working class. That is the appeal of Graham Platner. Or it was the appeal of Graham Platner, I should say. Now we know he is not the one to facilitate that message, because he's a rapist, and that inexcusable. But again, the fact that he made it this far shows just how upset people are with the current political system. And it's something that needs to be addressed. I don't really know what else to say. I mean, it's a massive disappointment. I was a pretty big fan of Graham Platner until now, obviously. I don't know. It's disappointing. It's upsetting. But we need to continue on. We need a new candidate. We need him to drop out. Yeah. There's not really much more to say. I'll see you guys later.